My name is Jake Kennedy, and I'm the author of Apollinaire Speech to the War Medic. Apollinaire Speech to the War Medic is in two sections, and the majority of the first sections, JR studies, and objects studies primarily, and they were inspired in part from this amazing, just I guess, mid 20th century French writer, Francis Ponge, and he to me just bridged this gap between the essay, the prose poem, and when I discovered some of his texts, I was just so excited about his meditations on soap and rain and just very kind of everyday objects. So the first section is primarily made up of these studies, and then the second section is called Light and Char, and I actually wrote it in part for my good friend Jason DeWinitz, and I think it's my goofy way of trying to, if the first part of the book is sort of about concrete nouns and objects, I think the last part is trying to think through some abstractions. So I try to take on some ideas of some hokey ideas like loneliness and whatever, but try to find some, or suffering or something, and try to find some comparable images to work through those ideas. So I'm excited about the book in that way, because I think structurally it seems interesting to me. So yeah, and my mom says it's good, so that's what matters. Because I do some teaching of creative writing classes, and I realized that more and more I was talking in my classes about metaphor and trying to, I was just getting excited about certain metaphors and trying to convey the weird power of bringing together two seemingly dissimilar things, and was trying to figure out where is that wonderful magic happening when you find what looks like an equivalence but actually isn't. So it seemed like the power of that was always deferred a bit, which seemed really thrilling. So I think some of the inspiration for the object studies came out of just talking with some of my amazing students about the power of metaphor. So and I wanted to think as freshly maybe as I could about some banal objects, and my life is exceedingly banal. So it was the only way to breathe. Marcel Duchamp said this thing about the ready-mades where he knew he'd found the object when it didn't really appeal to him on any sort of aesthetic level. So he would choose a shovel or a bottle dryer or something like that to lay claim to as a piece of art. And so I think I was motivated a little bit by that. So I was thinking about things like claw hammers and cat piss and things that may not necessarily reek of the aesthetic or something. So yeah. The Apollinaire Speech to the War Medic points to this moment that I had read about where he had gone to the front and received, I believe, a shrapnel wound to the head, but in my mind I'd kind of turned it into him being shot in the head, and I was just thinking about some of his wonderful work, which celebrates the modern, but also is aware that things are really crumbling, and so I just was sort of hallucinating this moment and wondering what in his suffering and in this kind of maybe terrible euphoria, what might he say to this war medic that was bandaging up his big Apollinaire head. So the poem is kind of imagining his voice mumbling these words, and it's a great poem, bound to be anthologized. One of the pieces in there is called Beckett. It's got 3 parts, and I think it's knife, hole, and lung are the names of the three sections. And the piece is a meditation on this story I had read about an event that happened to Samuel Beckett when he was walking on a Paris street, two friends, and he was randomly stabbed. And then I think the knife almost pierced his lung, and he was in hospital for a while. And then when the trial happened, they asked the assailant, I guess, who was a homeless dude, and his name was Mr. Prudent, Monsieur Prudent, and they asked him why he did it, and he said, "Je ne sais pas, I don't know." And so it seemed, for my sick taste, it seemed like a pretty uncanny mirroring of Beckett's own formal interest in his plays and these kinds of challenges to our desire to see a world full of meaning, with constantly showing us that it's kind of devoid of that. But I think what's so amazing about Beckett is his sense of humor is so sustaining, and I don't think that gets often celebrated so much. So that I think Godot or Endgame, I think they're wickedly funny plays, and so for me, there's something kind of redeeming and thrilling about also how funny that come around again-ness is of some of his core themes. I kind of have my dad in mind most times as a reader, because my dad used to say this thing. He used to say, "The whole world doesn't revolve around you, comma, asshole." And so often I have in mind just wondering how his bullshit detector would be flickering or not. So, and I write for Yoko.